Like so many a story, this too has a table of contents. The first chapter might be called Stop Rearranging the Deck Chair, which is about why we need more innovation than ever and why it is becoming increasingly urgent. The second chapter is about the big bad wolf. After the argument for innovation, is there perhaps also one against it? Is innovation perhaps the big bad wolf who has eaten chalk to make us let him into the house? Might there be a dark side to innovation? Chapter 3 explores that if indeed we need innovation, and if there is a dark side to it, perhaps we need to rethink it. It's innovation, Jim, but not as we know it. The last chapter draws on Albert Einstein's wisdom that we cannot solve the problem with a mindset that has created it, and explores what might have to happen for us to be able to think differently, and not only about innovation. So, let the story begin. The interesting was that the Council of the Wise was not one specific group of people, nor were they located in one particular country or even part of the world. The Council of the Wise came from many different locations, from all over the globe, with people from all walks of life. They looked at the state of affairs of our planet and saw things that concerned them greatly. More and more people were born and wanted to live on this one and only planet we have. Not only that, but most of them wanted to live like the Americans, which was fine by most corporations, as they believed that consumerism and growth were the only desirable objectives. Yet, if indeed everyone lived and consumed like the Americans, we would require 4 planets Earth by 2020. And they saw that many of these people were suffering. Looking at humanity as a whole, there seemed to be something strange going on. What seemed to cause problems for one group could have been the solution for another. They saw people who threw their food away. In the UK alone, it was 1/3 of all food purchased. Despite all the food being thrown away, they also saw so many people who were suffering from obesity. Yet at the same time were there so many dying of starvation. Indeed, as Yuval Noah Harari states in his book *Sapiens*, each year the US population spends more money on diets than the amount needed to feed all the hungry poorest of the rest of the world. The Wise knew 70% of our planet to be covered by water. Yet they were also aware that by 2025, 3 billion people would be lacking access to water. They also knew that turning off the water while brushing your teeth would save 47 litres each time. Pretty stunning if you know that the minimum amount of water a person needs a day is 7.5 litres. And did you notice that Quantum of Solace, the James Bond movie released in 2008, was not about oil, diamonds, space technology or gold, but about access to water? They noticed a rapid depletion of traditional sources of energy and a careless approach to mining resources such as coal, oil and gas that not only destroyed the environment but also neglected to take needs of future generations into account. Yet it was known that the sun had the power to provide planet Earth with 1,800 times the energy that was currently being used. Even the winds that crossed the Earth would satisfy energy needs of our planet 200 times over. They were quite pleased that the production of wind energy had gone up from just under 24,000 megawatt in 2001 to close to 500,000 megawatt in 2016, with China being the biggest producer with just under 35% of global output. Yet such were their concerns that they joined the cry for, we need innovation, we need to become more innovative. Indeed, for well over a decade now, innovation has been right on top of CEOs' agendas. Whether it is 80% of Fortune 500 US companies in 2003 who listed innovation as one of their top 3 priorities, or 82% of CEOs in 2017 who were concerned that the existing current products and services would not be relevant in 3 years' time. In fact, there were many wise men who had been advocating innovation. Amongst them were management guru Peter Drucker, who once said, "Marketing and innovation produce results, all the rest are costs. Another management guru, Tom Peters, had proclaimed innovate or die, and not least there is best-selling author Malcolm Gladwell, who had declared innovation is at the heart of the knowledge economy. Everyone seemed to share the view that innovation was the one and only way to compete and create a future, be it at the organizational or societal level, and to provide the growth that everyone considered to be so essential for the survival of humanity. Yet the wisest of the Council of Wise spoke up and asked, why is it that we talk about growth? And what is this growth we are talking about? Are we talking about growth of individuals, of humanity, or are we talking about growth in consumption? It certainly seems to be the latter, if we look at how we measure growth. Are we looking at a country's gross domestic product to decide whether they are growing or not? But do we want growth if it undermines the future of our children? Were not the Iraqis, Indians so much wiser when suggesting decisions be made with the considerations of their consequences for 7 generations hence? In particular in the energy sector, would our decisions not be different? I believe we should look after the world for our children, rather than feel that we have inherited and own it. Do we want growth for the sake of it? And do we want innovation for the sake of it? I believe not. I hope not. Both are indicators for something else that is more difficult to measure otherwise. I believe we started using growth and GDP and such like as a measure as it seems to be an indicator for the improvement of standards of living. This, in turn, so could be argued, is supposed to reflect people's well-being. So therefore, it seems to me that talking about innovation for growth should really be talking about innovation to improve people's standards of living and ultimately their well-being. If it is an improvement of well-being of people around the globe, is the question not, can we continue to use GDP at what seems to be the one and only measure? And she continued, quoting some well-known and respected people. My first witness has proclaimed over 40 years ago, GDP is not measuring that which makes life worthwhile. That was no lesser than Robert F. Kennedy. In 2007, a paper by the European Parliament stated that GDP does not properly account for social and environmental costs and benefits. It is also difficult to achieve sustainable decision-making aiming at sustainable progress and well-being if welfare is being considered from a purely financial point of view. A third voice she added to the mix was British Prime Minister David Cameron, who commented in 2006 that there is more to life than making money, arguing that improving people's happiness is a key challenge for politicians, which is why he promoted replacing a GDP with measuring GWB, general well-being. Whether he has really done anything about it when he was in power is another question. The problem of taking one's own medicine again? The final voice she threw into the mix was that of one Herman Daly, the author of Beyond Growth, who said, the concepts growth and development are not necessarily the same. Funny enough, we talk about developing and developed countries, not about growing and grown-up countries. Daly also stated that economic growth occurs when increases in production come at an expense in resources and well-being that is worth more than the items made. She said, be careful what you wish for. Perhaps we ought to rethink whether we really want innovation for growth as currently understood, or perhaps we need to rethink innovation and ask, do we have perhaps too much innovation? Do we have the right kind of innovation? Do we, in fact, have responsible innovation? It seems, she said, that these are not really questions we ask. She paused. Perhaps we should agree what we mean by innovation first. When we talk about innovation, do we actually talk about the same thing? The wisest of the council was aware that no conversation about innovation lasted long before the question, what do you mean by it, arose. So she decided to explain to her fellow councillors what her understanding of innovation was. Innovation is about embracing the path of change to create value. She said, I have thought long about this. And in this definition of innovation, several things are important to me. First of all, it is a choice, a conscious decision to seek change. Why is the conscious bit so important to me? And she asked her fellow councillors. Do any of you still engage in New Year's resolutions? They smiled and shook their heads. And this is when we want to change. Have you been involved in truly successful organizational change? Then you will know that it is not easy. It takes a lot of energy, conviction, courage, and patience. Unless you are making a conscious decision to embark on this route, you will probably give up halfway through. She said, I have chosen the word path because to me change and innovation are not about reaching an end point. They are about a continuous path, a meandering path that occasionally turns back on itself, a path that branches off in different directions. Indeed, innovation is a never-ending journey. Why? Because the context in which we operate does not stay the same. It changes constantly. What is right and appropriate today will be out of date tomorrow. Let me illustrate it through a story. She told. Imagine that you have a cage with 5 freshly captured monkeys. Inside the cage you hang a bunch of nice bananas. After a while the first monkey overcomes her shyness and ventures towards the bananas. As soon as she tries to touch them, you get out a hose pipe with really cold water and spray the monkey. And for good measure, you spray all the other monkeys as well. Each time a monkey gets up the courage to reach for the bananas, you repeat that exercise. Spray the curious monkey and all the others as well. The monkeys in your cage will learn soon that going for the bananas is not a good idea. Once they have learned that lesson, you take out one of the monkeys and replace it with a new little monkey. Now, what do you think that new monkey will do? Of course, go for the bananas. But what do you think will the other monkeys do? Not difficult to imagine that the other monkeys will get hold of the new monkey and beat him or her up. In this cage, we do not eat bananas. The new monkey learns his lesson quickly, and no sooner has he learned his lesson that you, one by one, exchange the 4 remaining of the initial set, until you have a cage of 5 monkeys with lovely bananas within easy reach, yet none of the monkeys will be interested in them, even though not one of them has ever been sprayed with cold water. You see, she pointed out, that one important lesson is, when we introduce rules of behavior, when culture in a group is shaped, there are generally very good reasons for why such rules are introduced. On the whole, people are neither stupid nor mean nor ignorant. We just forget that our context changes constantly, and that it would serve us well to question whether what has worked for us in the past continues to serve us well in the present and future. This has never been more true than today, in this fast-paced context we are living in. She picked up the thread of her understanding of innovation and said, finally, there is value. Innovation for the sake of it is a waste of resources. It seems that many of those 82% of CEOs who stand up in their organizations declaring, no, demanding more innovation, often leave it at that. But what if I ask you, have you got a great idea? And what happens if a CEO stands up and demands more innovation without explaining what it is to achieve and where it is to take the company? Some of you may be familiar with the British group of comedians Monty Python. In one of their sketches on the theme of Silly Olympics, they have a race for people with no sense of direction. As you would expect, participants in the race warm up at the start, get ready, and at the starting gun, everyone runs off in a different direction. This is what I see happening in organizations. Yet what are you to say unless I give some parameters as to what this good idea is supposed to do or be about? It also seems to me, she continued, that there are too many people jumping onto the innovation bandwagon just because everyone else is doing it. The carriages called open innovation and crowdsourcing are particularly popular at the moment. In my view, this is not only not good enough, but positively a waste of scarce resources, including engagement and goodwill of employees, if we ask for innovation and then leave it at that. Innovation is a means to an end, not the end in itself, and hence we need to understand why exactly we want innovation and what we want to achieve through it. While there was certainly plenty of evidence that innovative organizations were doing economically better than less innovative companies and were also able to attract the best talent, an important factor if you buy into the argument that we live in a knowledge economy, acting on that evidence seemed to be a challenge. The Council was sure that it had something to do with the fact that return on investment on innovation was notoriously difficult to measure, and, knowing the mindset of so many managers and organizations, were worried about that. They felt that trusting that investment in innovation was the right choice, yet felt somehow reminded of a poem by Franz Kafka, The Departure, which goes as follows. I ordered my horse to be brought from the stables. The servants did not understand me. I went to the stables myself, saddled my horse and mounted. In the distance I heard the sound of a trumpet. I asked him what it meant. He knew nothing and had heard nothing. At the gate he stopped me and asked, "Where is the master going?" "I don't know," I said. "Only away from here, only away from here, always away from here. This is the only way I can reach my goal." "So you know your goal?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "I've just said, away from here, that is my goal." "You have no food," he said. "I don't need any," said I. "The journey is so long that I'll die of starvation should I not get any on my way. No food supply can save me." It is really fortunate that this is a truly incredible journey. They agreed that committing to creating a more innovative organization had the same quality that was encapsulated in Kafka's short story, something that was characterized simultaneously by certainty and ambiguity. Certainty about the need or desire to take action, ambiguity about which path to choose, what exactly the results would be and how exactly one would get there, and who would be needed on the journey. More often than not, there is ambiguity about more than one of those aspects. Council of the Wise worried about such degrees of uncertainty and ambiguity that were invariably part of innovation. So they also realized that it would not be innovation if it were not the case. They worried because they were aware that ambiguity and uncertainty did not sit well with many of those making decisions in organizations, particularly those at middle management level. If you wonder why there might be a challenge around those at these levels, in particular, consider the following. What is on the agenda for most organizations most of the time, and has been for years? Cost-cutting and efficiency drives. In order to survive, all organizations feel the necessity to embark on cost-cutting exercises and efficiency drives, and of course it is important. Yet, if someone's preference and strength is around the management of cost and efficiencies, how do you think they are going to react to someone approaching them with the following? I have this fantastic idea for an electronic gadget that's not much bigger than a cigarette box and which allows people to listen to music on the go. I'm not quite sure how we are going to realize it, in fact, nor am I sure who the target market will be, but I truly think it is a fantastic idea. The Council felt that there were not many organizations in which the Sony Walkman or the Apple iPod would have stood a chance. But the wisest of the wise was not done yet and asked, "Have you ever thought about the dark side of innovation? Is there not too much hype around innovation? We read about the need of innovation everywhere, annual reports, magazines, newspaper, and no one seems to challenge this. Are we not often too excited about what is possible without asking whether it is also desirable and beneficial from a systems perspective? What about all those electronic gadgets that have more functionality than most of us want? They just make for a confusing rather than enriching experience. It is not for nothing that Apple was so successful, Complexity and functionality are invisible for the user who experiences simplicity. Though she felt that Apple too had lost it, and had started to turn out incremental improvement after incremental improvement, adding to the confusion of consumers. We seem to justify doubtful innovations in the name of convenience and are enjoying the benefits without considering the true costs. Think about the waste created by all the convenience food as well as conveniently packaged food. Perhaps your rubbish bin is as full with packaging material as mine after every shop. And what worries me is that we live in a paradigm that puts quantity above quality. Most people rather buy 5 t-shirts that fall apart in a couple of months rather than one that is of beautiful quality and will last a long time. Think about what were once in a lifetime purchases, such as furniture. Does not even that have become a throwaway affair? And finally, she said, there is too much haste and not enough speed. The pace of innovation is too fast. And there are 2 aspects to it. First, we introduce innovations before we understand the consequences of what we have already created. Perhaps GM food, when originally introduced, falls into this category. And second, the rate at which product improvements are introduced is beyond what consumers can absorb, and surely cannot be the most effective use of resources. When you are innovating, do you consider the downsides and possible negative implications? And does this truly influence whether or not you proceed? Unless, of course, you are in the pharmaceutical or similar industries, and such negligence would have serious consequences. The council went quiet and considered what the wise one had said. Finally one exclaimed, "But we do need innovation. If not innovation as we know it, what then? What do we need to do differently?"